Hello and welcome to News Center. You are watching our special broadcast and we're looking at US-India defense ties at this juncture. India and the United States have started the second edition of the Indus X, a bridge between the US and Indian defense industries and ways being considered by both governments to bolster cooperation in new defense technologies. We spoke to Lindsay Ford, who is the US Deputy Assistant Secretary for Defense, and she said that Indo-US defense cooperation is going to extend to co-production and exports, not just in the Indo-Pacific, but beyond the Indo-Pacific as well. Let's listen in to that exclusive interview.
Well, you know, my friend, Ambassador Eric Garcetti, who is our ambassador here in New Delhi, is very fond of saying that we see the future of U.S.-India technology cooperation ranging from the seabed to the stars. And I think that's the vision, ultimately. But the reality is, a lot of times there are barriers. It's very hard sometimes for our industry to know what opportunities are out there and how to navigate pretty large bureaucracies that we have on both sides. So what we are trying to do through Indus X is to build a bridge, create partnerships between private industry, investors, researchers that really allow us to move faster and bring that vision into reality much sooner.
Right. I would like to ask you, on the Indian side, are there certain regulatory issues which you would hope are simplified for closer industrial cooperation?
I think there are certainly things that we can streamline on both sides, America and India. We are two very large, sometimes ponderous bureaucracies that can make it hard, especially for small startups, to know where to begin. And so one thing we're really trying to do here is educate, help U.S. and Indian companies understand how to work with each other's system, but also to listen. So we in government, in these kinds of meetings, want to hear from industry about what they see as the specific pain points as they try to work together. And then we go back and we look at how to make those easier.
Right. I'd like to ask you about 2 or 3 major defense deals that were signed between India and US. The last state visit of the Prime Minister to Washington was a historic one. We saw the GE-HAL jet engine deal being signed. Give us a sense of the status of the deal. By when do you think the complete technology transfer as permitted under that contract will be done, and when do we begin manufacturing of jet engines here in India?
Sure. We are incredibly excited about the future for this deal, and we do see this as a transformative moment, I think, for the U.S.-India defense partnership. You know, the approval of the technology transfer that the U.S. government made here is the most significant approval of jet engine technology to be produced overseas that we've ever made. It says something about the trust that we have in this partnership and where we see the future headed. So obviously the companies are continuing to work through those negotiations, but I can say this deal we see as a huge priority, but it's not just this one. There are others. So increasingly through our defense industry roadmap, we're looking at new opportunities. When Secretary Austin was here in November, one we talked about was working together on armored combat systems. So I think this is just one of what we believe will ultimately be many opportunities for co-production together.
Right. So you spoke about armored combat systems. What is the status of conversations on that?
Again, I think we're continuing to work as government through all of the details of how we can bring this to fruition and reality. But when you look at Indus X, for example, I think it gives you a sense of the ambition that we have and the fact that we don't want to just work in the same status quo ways that can often be really slow and tedious. So we launched Indus X in June. In about 8 months' time, we have launched joint challenges focused on ISR and maritime communications, and tomorrow we're going to be announcing the winners of those challenges, bringing over $1 million to U.S. and Indian startups. So it's that kind of speed that we're focused on in all of these initiatives.
Right. My final question to you would be about cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. You're working on supply chain resilience. How much is U.S. actually importing from India right now in terms of defense components? Is there also a plan to co-design and make for countries maybe in the Indo-Pacific or to friendly countries?
Absolutely. I think we see the ultimate vision for the U.S.-India partnership as not just being about what we can do here together, but what we can do in the entirety of the Indo-Pacific region. So whether it's defense sales, broader technology, I think the idea is that what we make here ultimately is for the prosperity and the security of the entire Indo-Pacific region. And when you look at the amount of jobs the United States defense industry is working to create here in India, and frankly, that Indian innovation and investment is creating in the United States. There's a lot more of that to come, and I think the ramifications of that can be more than just the Indo-Pacific region. I think it can be truly global in scope.
I also caught up with Atul Keshav, president of the US-India Business Council, on the sidelines of the Indus-X summit. I began by asking him about what is the US seeking to achieve from the summit and its relationship with India.
I think there's a lot of optimism, right? US-India relations are really at an all-time high, and this is an extremely dangerous moment in the geostrategic context. There's enough potential for global risk that it's important that we get the defense relationship right between the two biggest democracies on earth. So this Indus-X conference, following up on the one last year that we launched Indus-X in Washington, is to focus on co-development and co-production between American and Indian companies to ensure your defense needs and our defense needs.
You spoke about the volatile environment we are in. How is this going to really direct the way both nations will work together? What are some of the sectors that you see immediate collaboration on?
So if you went up to the exhibit hall, where we have a whole bunch of US IBC companies, SIDM companies, SIDM is the Society of Indian Defense Manufacturers, there's some really great, innovative, world-class technology being showcased. We've got officials from the MOD and the Pentagon that are walking through there. I just walked Deputy Secretary of State Rich Verma through there. And if you look at the drone technology coming out of India, it's very impressive. Artificial intelligence-powered robotics. One of our companies has a Canon mortar bore cleaning machine that reduces the amount of time from 4 days of work to clean a cannon bore down to 10 hours. And they use artificial intelligence and a robot to do what otherwise would take 10 crew members 4 days each to do. So this kind of innovation in undersea surveillance systems, in drones, in precision-guided munitions, in electro-optics is happening at a very rapid pace of innovation in small companies. Right? There are also world-class Indian companies, for instance, that are doing highly refined, high-tolerance metallurgies for aircraft engines. So you've got the big majors like Boeing and Lockheed Martin partnering up with Tatas and other big Indian companies to make important components for large platforms. But you have an enormous amount of innovation happening as well. So the key objective of Indus-X is to partner up your private sector and our private sector for the deterrence and defense of both of our countries.
Right. Now, I would like to ask you, since the launch of the Indus-X and since the Prime Minister's visit to Washington, D.C. last year, that was a historic state visit, what have been some of the changes in the U.S. licensing system to make it easier for India to acquire defense equipment from the United States?
So, when you talk to senior officials at the National Security Council, in the Pentagon, in the State Department, Commerce Department. These are the 4 agencies that look at releasability. There's a very clear understanding that India is our long-term strategic partner. We are Quad partners. We are partners in the Middle East. We're partners in Africa. We're partners in the Indian Ocean region. And that leads to a posture of favorability in all of the requests that are coming from India. India is also a major defense partner of the United States. That's enshrined in law. It gives access to, for India to the highest levels of technology in our system. And so there's a predisposition toward leaning forward toward India. Now, national security issues like this are very sensitive. There are technologies that we have to protect from our shared enemies. I think we know who those are. And we've got to be very careful to make sure that the technologies are protected. But in some of the most sensitive things we do, like engine production, where the U.S. has a clear lead over our adversaries, we are now doing things with India that I think are going to be very advantageous for our shared partnership. That GE 414 deal is a big deal. Mm-hmm. So I think the foot is on the gas pedal.
Right. Now, to speak about some of your recommendations to the Indian government on how to make defense acquisitions easier, defense production easier, how to make it easier for startups to function. Could you give us some of those recommendations as well?
I think that both governments should have faith in their private sectors. There are amazing Indian private sector companies that are doing some incredible cutting-edge technological advancement, research, innovative thinking in how to take care of the defense needs of your government and our government. And I think that having faith in those private sector companies, encouraging them to partner up with American private sector companies is going to unleash a capability in India that will make India one of the strongest defense platforms and producers, not only for India, but for the entire world.
Right. I'd like to ask you about the interest in U.S. companies, the U.S. defense sector, in investing in India. Recently, we saw the first 100% FDI deal in defense for Saab being cleared. Now, that was a big one. Are there more companies in the United States who would probably want to come and invest in the Indian ecosystem in a big way? What's the level of interest?
So I commend the Indian government for a lot of innovation in clearing FDI and defense sectors all the way up, as you said, even to 100%. And our companies are noticing that. And you already have, as I mentioned earlier, the partnerships between Tata's and Boeing, Tata's and Lockheed Martin, and other big defense tie-ups. For instance, the joint wing for the F-16, F-15 is now made in India. The C-130 empennage, which is the whole rear of the beast, is made in India. The Sikorsky cabins for the helicopters that the President of the United States flies around on are made in India. More and more of that is happening because the regulatory and policy environment is becoming more conducive. I think our companies are quite attracted to the Make in India proposals of the government. They are increasingly investing in India. You look at the big design centers like the one Boeing just opened with the Prime Minister in Bangalore a few days ago. That is going to happen more and more because you've got Indian skilled labor, you've got a burgeoning Indian defense ecosystem. I think an increasing faith by the government of India in the power of the private sector. And so that's a message that's appealing to our companies.
Right. My final question would be, we signed two major agreements last year. One on the GE HAL jet engine deal, then the 31 drone deal, the MQ-9B Reaper drones for the Indian defense sector. How long could these deals take in terms of reaching fruition? I know it's difficult to say. In some cases, it has to go through Congress. But from your experience, how long can these deals actually take?
So there's a lot of engagement that is structured in the way that we do defense sales. And I think over the years, our Indian friends have understood that we're very procedure driven, we're very transparent, and we're very clear about how the balance of powers works in our system. I think what our Indian friends have realized is that because of our transparency, there's no question of any impropriety. There's no question of graft. There's no funny business. Indian government can work with our companies in a way that is very above board. So the highest levels of ethics and transparency, a process stipulated by the American government in law that goes through a series of box checks, which results then in a final contract. Once that contract is signed, then it's just manufacturing and delivery. So, for instance, for the GE 414s, this could be a partnership, a marriage even, of 40 years. You know, those engines will go into fighter planes that could serve to defend India for decades to come. And there will be parts and maintenance, supply chain issues that will need to be worked, technology issues for many, many years. And it'll bring our entire ecosystems closer together. And it will build a great deal of trust and confidence. On the drones, my understanding is that as soon as the contract is signed, 36 months later, the contract is fulfilled. And that's all based on production slots and everything else. So there's a lot of what you see is what you get with the United States. There's nothing beneath the surface. Ours is an open, transparent democracy. The old joke is we do a lot of negotiating out in the open, but that can create confidence for the taxpayer that you're getting a good deal, a transparent deal with the very best technology, the very best and highest levels of ethics and transparency, fantastic after-sale support for the lifetime of the platform to ensure that it is available for the defense of India and the people of India.
Right. And finally, when we speak about the INDUS-X as well, are you working with any sort of vision document for the next 5 years? Where do you see the defense trade in the next 5 years between the two countries?
I wouldn't say a document per se, but there is a very clear vision, and you heard it from Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense Lindsey Ford, you heard it from Deputy Secretary of State Rich Varma and others in the room. I think the Indian and U.S. governments share a lot of ambition that a real tight and very complementary private sector to private sector partnership will be developed for components, for subcomponents, OEMs, all of the subcontractors for OEMs, because here's the critical issue. Going back to my point about rising geostrategic tensions, India and America, the two largest democracies on earth, have to ensure the defense of their countries end to end. You have to make every bullet, shell, boot, uniform, missile, guidance package to protect your people, and we have to do the same. We cannot rely on external supply chains. We cannot rely on uncertain suppliers, and we have to rely on the best technology. So if we can do that together, it's good for you, it's good for us, and it's frankly good for every freedom-minded country on earth. Right. So I think that's the vision, is to see what is, becoming a more and more accelerated partnership really take full flight. And that's the X in INDUS-X, is India-US Accelerator.
Time for a short break, but don't go anywhere. The news continues on the other side.